The dust never settles. The sun beat down on the dry land like an angry god, and the wind whispered secrets through the broken boards of the old train station in Dustvale. The train hissed as it pulled away, leaving behind only dust, heat, and a single girl, barely 16, with big brown eyes, cracked lips, and a tightly clutched locket in her palm. Her name was Clara Mayfield. She stood there quietly, her dress tattered and shoes worn thin from walking too many miles. The man who brought her stepfather, with whiskey breath and greedy hands, was already gone. He had traded her to Madame Belle's Wild Rose Saloon for 5 silver coins and a bottle of something strong. That was all she was worth to him. Clara didn't cry, not anymore. She had cried all the way from Missouri to here. Now there were no tears left, only the endless wind, blowing grit into her eyes and mouth, and the sound of boots walking toward her. A woman with red curls, painted lips, and sharp eyes stopped in front of her. She wore a bright corset and held a long cigarette between her fingers. "You're Clara?" the woman asked, voice cold and brisk. Clara nodded once. "I'm Madame Belle. You belong to me now. Come along, girl. Ain't nobody gonna wait for you in this town." She turned and walked, heels clicking against the wooden boards. Clara followed, her heart pounding. The brothel of the Wild Rose Saloon looked pretty from the outside. Bright lights, swinging doors, music and laughter. But inside, the walls were sticky, the air thick with smoke, perfume, and something sadder that Clara couldn't name. There were mirrors, but they were cracked. Curtains, but stained. Men sat at tables, drinking, laughing, gambling. Some turned to look at Clara with hungry eyes. She felt sick. Madame Belle led her upstairs to a small room. The bed was clean, but the window was nailed shut. "This is your room," Belle said. "You'll clean the floor, serve drinks, and learn what the girls do. If you run, I'll send the sheriff after you. And trust me, Sheriff Briggs doesn't ask questions." Clara just nodded again. Later that night, she sat alone on the bed, turning the locket over in her fingers. Inside was a tiny photo of her mother, smiling, warm and gone for many years now. "Mama, what do I do?" she whispered. The desert wind rattled the window. No answer came. Mama June. The next morning, Clara met a woman in the kitchen. She was large, warm, and older, with graying hair tied up in a bun. She was humming a gospel tune and stirring a pot of oatmeal. "You must be Clara," she said kindly. "I'm Mama June. I do the cooking and cleaning round here. I also patch up the girls when they get bruised." Clara blinked. "They get bruised?" Mama June's smile faded. "You'll see. But don't you worry, sugar. You stick close to me. I'll teach you how to survive." Clara felt her chest tighten. It was the first kind voice she had heard in weeks. That day, Clara washed floors, swept porches, and served drinks. Men whistled at her. One grabbed her wrist, but Mama June pulled her away just in time. That night, Clara locked her door and cried quietly into her pillow, biting her fists so no one would hear. Dustvale silence. The town of Dustvale was built on gold and blood. Miners, outlaws, gamblers, and drifters came through. There was a sheriff, but he took coins from Madame Belle. There was a church, but the pastor looked away when the girls walked past. No one cared. Clara kept to herself. She scrubbed, she served, and she tried not to speak unless spoken to. The other girls were older. Some kind, some cruel. One of them, Sadie, warned her with tired eyes. "You'll never leave, girl. You might think you will, but this place eats you." Clara didn't answer. But each night, after the lights went out, she took a small pencil from under her mattress and wrote in the back of an old book Mama June had given her. She wrote letters. Not to anyone in particular, just to the sky, the desert, the wind. She wrote about her mother, about the pain, about how she was not going to let Dustvale own her soul. The silent pact. One evening a fight broke out downstairs. Clara ran to help Mama June, who was holding back a drunk miner with a broken bottle in his hand. One of the girls had said no, and he didn't like that. Clara stood between them, heart racing, and shouted, "Leave her alone." The room fell silent. The man laughed. "Little girl thinks she's a hero." He stepped forward. But then something strange happened. All the girls, Sadie, Mary Lou, even the quiet one named Ruth, stood up. One by one. They didn't speak, but they blocked the man's way. Sheriff Briggs arrived soon after, but he didn't arrest the man. He just told him to cool off. And he gave Clara a long look, like a warning. That night, Mama June came to Clara's room. "With a bandage and some tea, you've got fire," she said. "But fire draws wind. Be careful, sugar." Clara looked out the window and whispered, "The dust never settles here." Mama June sat beside her. "No, baby, it doesn't, but some people learn how to stand in it." The later weeks passed. Then months. Clara was 17 now. She had learned to walk without looking afraid. She had learned which men to avoid and how to smile without meaning it. But inside, she was still writing. One day she slipped a letter beneath the church door. It was a simple message. "There are girls here who cry in silence, who bleed behind closed doors. This town is full of ghosts that are still breathing. If anyone out there still believes in God, prove it." She didn't sign it the next Sunday. The next Sunday, the preacher read from the book of Job, tears in his eyes. Clara smiled softly. Someone had heard ending scene of part 1 YouTube video transcript format. Soft piano music begins. The screen shows the desert wind blowing across the porch of the Wild Rose Saloon. The camera slowly zooms in on Clara sitting by a dusty window. Narrator. Soft voice. She came with nothing but a broken heart and a locket. The men saw a girl to be bought, but the wind saw a storm rising. Cut to Clara placing a folded letter under the church door. Narrator. She didn't scream. She didn't fight back with fists. She fought with paper and words, with hope and silence. In a town that had forgotten kindness, she remembered. Clara sits on her bed, writing by candlelight. Her face is calm, determined. Narrator. They called it survival, but she called it waiting for the right moment, for a reason to speak, for a crack in the wall of Dustvale. Final shot. Clara walking through the saloon, head held high. The other girls look at her not just as the youngest anymore, but as something stronger. Narrator. The dust never settled, but neither did she fade. 2 black title card. To be continued in part 2, A Town That Looked Away. Dustvale was a town with doors that closed too quickly and eyes that looked away too often. By the time Clara Mayfield turned 17, she had memorized every creak of the Wild Rose Saloons, wooden floorboards, every flicker of the gas lanterns, and every lie the town whispered to itself when the sun went down. Each morning began with the same sounds: whiskey glasses clinking, card tables flipping, footsteps of the girls going down the stairs, and the sighs of tired women forced to become something they never asked to be. But Clara wasn't just surviving anymore. She was watching, remembering, writing, and inside her heart, something was growing, not anger, not revenge. Something more dangerous. Hope. The letters that kept coming. She had written the first letter and slipped it under the church door like a secret prayer. But now she started writing more. One letter went under the preacher's pew, another beneath the sheriff's door, another she tied to the leg of a traveling mail horse and let it go. Each letter was anonymous, just a child's handwriting, shaky and filled with pain. They spoke of broken promises, bruised girls, and silent screams that echoed behind polished doors. And yet, the town stayed quiet, even when the preacher started pausing during sermons, even when he said things like, "What you ignore in the name of comfort, God will remember in the name of justice." No one moved. No one dared challenge Madame Bell, because Dustvale was built on bones, and everyone was afraid of making the wind angry. Behind the red curtain, Clara had never gone past the red curtain on the second floor of the saloon. That space was only for the important customers: lawmen, businessmen, judges. That's where the girls stopped being people and became property. One night, Clara saw a man in uniform walk out from behind the curtain, zipping up his belt with a smirk on his face. The girl following him was limping. Her face was painted with makeup, but nothing could cover her swollen cheek and blank eyes. Clara helped her to her room. What happened? The girl, her name was Millie, shook her head. Don't ask. Don't make trouble. But Clara had already decided. Mama June's warning that night. Clara sat with Mama June in the quiet kitchen. The smell of biscuits and old wood filled the air. Mama June was sewing a rip in one of the girls' dresses. Clara hesitated. Mama June. What would happen if someone wrote to the newspapers in the city? Mama June stopped sewing. Her hands trembled slightly. I'd say that someone should be very careful, she said slowly. This town isn't just built on gold and sin, Clara. It's protected by men who would rather burn a girl alive than be exposed. But what if people knew? Clara asked. Real people, from outside Dustvale. Wouldn't they help? Mama June looked at her for a long time. Maybe, or maybe they'd write a pretty article, and then forget. But you, Clara, you won't forget. That's what makes you dangerous. The day the sheriff came, Sheriff Briggs didn't knock. He just opened the saloon doors and walked in like he owned every inch of dust. His hat tilted forward, badge polished, gun always visible. But this time he wasn't drunk. He was angry. Where's the girl? He growled to Madame Bell. The new one. No, the young one. The letter writer. Clara froze where she stood, holding a tray of glasses. Bell blinked. What letter? Briggs pulled a crumpled page from his coat. This one says, I let a judge hurt a girl. It's got names in it. Clara's heart dropped. She had written that letter only 2 days ago. Had she slipped up? But Bell just laughed. Sheriff, that letter could have been written by any jealous whore in town, or even some bored schoolmom. Briggs grunted. What's your girls? If I catch whoever's doing this sale, make em disappear. He left, slamming the doors behind him. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She clutched her locket tightly and stared out the nailed window. The wind blew harder than usual, like it was warning her. The town is watching. The stranger in the alley 2 days later. Clara was taking out a bucket of old dishwater when she heard something in the alley behind the saloon. A groan, a cough. She peeked around the corner and saw a man, dirty, bleeding, with a long scar down his right cheek. His coat was torn, and he had a pistol at his side. Clara knelt beside him. Are you hurt? The man looked up. Does it matter? You're bleeding. Then I guess I'm alive. Clara helped him sit up. He winced. Who are you, Clara? She said. He gave a faint smile. I'm Elijah. She hesitated. You need a place to rest, but this ain't a good place. I've slept in worse, he replied. Clara nodded. Then come inside. Just don't let Belle see you. A quiet friendship over the next week. Elijah stayed in the storage room behind the kitchen. Mama June knew she always knew but said nothing. She just brought him food and bandages. Elijah wasn't like the men Clara knew. He didn't leer, he didn't grab. He asked questions about her books, about her letters, about her dreams. "I want to leave Dustvale," she said one night. He looked at her gently. "What's stopping you?" "The fear," she admitted. "And the other girls. I want to help them. I can't just run." Elijah nodded. "Then we do it together." Closing scene. The storm approaches one evening. Clara stood outside the saloon, her hands resting on the wooden rail. The wind was stronger than ever, and dark clouds rolled across the orange sky. Behind her, the town bustled. Drunk men, laughter, music, but Clara felt a storm coming. She looked down at the latest letter in her hand, written in tighter script, full of names and details, and slowly placed it in her coat. Next to her, Elijah stepped out of the shadows. "Ready?" he asked. Clara took a deep breath. "Let's make them look this time." They walked toward the church under the dying sun. The wind roared louder behind them. The scar on Elijah Granger's cheek wasn't just skin deep. It ran like a canyon across his past, a reminder of battles no one ever asked about, but Clara could feel them in the way he moved. He limped, as if pain had become his oldest friend. His voice was rough, but not cruel. And in a town where men spoke with fists and greed, Elijah's silence spoke more than sermons ever could. To Clara he was different. But difference in Dustvale was dangerous. The marked man in the storage room slept on a pile of old flour sacks in the storage room behind the saloon kitchen. At night, Clara brought him stale bread, apples, and whatever scraps she could hide. She stitched the tear in his coat herself. "Why'd you come to Dustvale?" she asked one night, brushing away crumbs. He looked at her with tired eyes. "Didn't Dustvale found me?" He didn't speak much after that, but the way he looked at Clara was enough, gentle, respectful, as if she were made of more than the broken boards and perfume-soaked walls that held her. A town full of questions soon. The town began to whisper. Clara spent her days pretending nothing had changed, serving drinks, scrubbing the floor, smiling when it hurt, but behind her eyes plans were forming. Elijah stayed hidden, but sometimes at night they talked in the back room by candlelight about books, maps, stars, and places where the air wasn't thick with judgment. "You ever been free?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Once. Long time ago. Felt like a clean river, cold but alive." Clara closed her eyes. "I want that." The day the stranger walked in one morning, the saloon doors swung open, and a stranger walked in. Not Elijah. This one wore a wide-brimmed hat and had eyes like frost. He was dressed like a drifter, but carried himself like a man on a mission. His boots were too clean for the desert. His hands rested too easy near his holster. He sat at the bar, said nothing, and watched everyone, but his gaze locked on Clara like a hawk. That night, Clara whispered to Elijah, "We've been noticed." He nodded. "That's not a man looking for a drink. That's a bounty hunter, a past that wouldn't stay buried." The truth came out, in pieces. Elijah wasn't just some wanderer. He had once been a Pinkerton detective, hunting killers and thieves. But he crossed the wrong people, exposed a railroad tycoon, helped free a group of trafficked women, and got marked. "They tried to kill me in Carson City," Elijah said, pulling down his collar to show a bullet graze. "They'll follow me, till I stop breathing." Clara stared. "Then why stay here?" He looked at her. "Because someone in this town still has a future. I just came to help her get to it." The plan that night, Clara drew a map on an old tablecloth in the kitchen. Mama June hovered nearby, nervous. "We can take the East Trail," Clara said. "Avoid the sheriff's patrol. Elijah and I ride at night, get to Silver Point, find a newspaperman. Tell them everything." Mama June frowned. "You sure you can trust them?" "No," Clara said, "but I trust Elijah." June sighed. "Girl, I've seen a lot of folks run. Most don't make it. But if you're set on this, I'll help. I've got a mule and a saddlebag full of hope." The betrayal, but Dustvale had ears everywhere. Sadie Dash, the same girl who once warned Clara she'd never leave, was drunk that night. Her heart had been broken too many times. Her smile was fake and her fear had become anger. She heard Clara whispering in the hall, and when Sheriff Briggs offered her coin and promise of protection, she told him everything. "They were running," she slurred tonight. "East Trail, the girl and the scar-faced man." Sheriff Briggs smiled. "Good girl." The ambush. The moon was barely a sliver in the sky when Clara and Elijah saddled the mule behind the saloon. Mama June kissed her on the forehead, tears in her eyes. "You're braver than me, baby," she whispered. "Now go." They rode slow and silent, the wind biting at their coats. Clara's heart pounded with each hoofbeat. But at the bend in the trail just past the canyon, they saw them. Torches, guns, voices. Sheriff Briggs and his men. "You thought you'd sneak out with a wanted man?" Briggs sneered. Clara tried to speak, but Elijah stepped forward. "I'm the one you want," he said. "Let the girl go." Briggs laughed. "Oh, you're right about that, but she's a liar. And liars don't get mercy." Fire and smoke before anyone could blink. A shot rang out. Elijah dove, pulling Clara to the ground. The mule reared and fled. Gunfire exploded across the canyon wall. Clara scrambled behind a rock, heart in her throat. "Elijah," she cried. He was hit in the leg. Bleeding, I'm fine, he shouted. Get the letters. She fumbled through her satchel, pulled out the bundle, dozens of pages she had written over the past year. Then she did something unthinkable. She lit one on fire and tossed it into the dry grass. The flames shot up fast. Panic screams. Dustvale's men backed off, yelling in the smoke. Clara dragged Elijah behind the brush. They disappeared into the night. The flames that Clara had set in the canyon didn't just burn dry grass. They burned a hole through Dustvale's silence, through every whispered deal, every bruised promise, and every crooked law. And when the fire rose high against the black sky, it didn't just light their escape, it lit a war. Smoke in the wind. Clara's legs ached as she helped. Elijah limped through the desert brush. His leg was bleeding badly. Each step left a mark behind in the dust, but he never complained. He only whispered, "Keep going, Clara, don't stop." They found shelter in an old shack just before dawn, an abandoned miner's cabin with holes in the roof and rattlesnakes curled in the corner. But it was enough for now. Clara boiled water, tore her skirt for bandages, and cleaned Elijah's wound. He winced. "You learned all this at the saloon?" She nodded. "We learn everything, except how to give up." Dustvale in chaos back in town. Sheriff Briggs was fuming. Half his posse had abandoned him in the smoke. The east trail was blocked, and rumors were flying. Who was that girl really? People whispered. Why would a Pinkerton man protect a saloon girl? Is there really a story behind those letters? And in the church, Preacher Adams stood at the pulpit, holding a burnt corner of a letter that had somehow floated into the pews. He read it out loud. "They call us names, they treat us like ghosts, but we are not shadows, we bleed too." Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others stared at the floor. One woman finally stood up and said, "She wrote the truth," and that was the beginning of Dustvale's reckoning. A girl on fire back at the cabin. Elijah lay resting while Clara sat outside, staring at the wide open sky. Her satchel was nearly empty now, just a few letters left. The rest had burned too, ash or been scattered by the wind, but something new was growing in her chest. Not just hope or purpose. She took out one last letter, folded it, and pressed it between two rocks for safekeeping. Then she whispered, "If we don't make it, someone will find this." That night, Clara heard the howls of coyotes and the rumble of hooves. Dustvale wasn't done chasing her. Mama June's courage back in the Wild Rose Saloon. Mama June knew the walls were closing in. Sheriff Briggs had come stomping through the doors with a revolver on his hip and fury in his voice. "You helped her, didn't you?" Mama June didn't blink. "I help every girl in this place. And if she's the one who finally broke your crooked back, then hallelujah." Briggs slapped her hard across the face. But Mama June stood tall. "You can beat me, Sheriff, but you can't unburn what's already turned to smoke." The other girls watched from the stairs, eyes wide. For the first time, someone stood up for them, and Mama June became more than just the cook. She became legend. The trap. 3 days passed. Clara and Elijah finally reached the edge of Silver Point, the next town, bigger, louder, but not any safer. They stayed in an old grain silo just outside the station yard, hoping to meet a man Elijah once trusted, Thomas Weller, a former reporter turned truth-teller. But Clara didn't know Briggs had sent riders ahead. One of them spotted her near the silo. That night, as she filled Elijah's canteen by the stream, she heard a twig snap. She turned a boot, a badge, a gun. "Don't move, girl," the deputy said, grinning. "The sheriff wants a word." The revolvers wait. Elijah didn't hesitate. Though wounded, he dragged himself from the grain silo with a rusted revolver in hand. He fired one shot, missed. The deputy turned and fired back. The bullet grazed Elijah's arm, but Clara used the moment to strike. She threw a stone, hard, at the deputy's face. The man fell, screaming, blood, confusion. Elijah tackled him, took his gun, and pointed it at his chest. "Do it." The deputy coughed. "You won't." Elijah didn't shoot. He simply said, "Tell Briggs, the girl has teeth now." He and Clara tied the man to a fence post and rode into Silver Point under the moonlight. Meeting the journalist, they found Thomas Weller in a dusty room above the town's print shop, surrounded by ink, paper, and unanswered letters. Clara stepped forward, clutching her satchel. "You don't know me, but you've printed lies about my town." Thomas looked up. "Dustvale." She nodded. "Now print the truth." She laid the last letters on his desk, one by one, some with names, some with bloodstains. Thomas read in silence. Then he whispered, "My God." Elijah sat down heavily, exhausted. Clara stood tall. "This isn't about revenge. This is about every girl no one ever believed." Clara Mayfield's voice had made it to paper. It printed at dawn on the front page of the Silver Point Ledger, beneath a headline that stopped shopkeepers mid-sweep and made coal workers pause with blackened hands. "Mid-sack girl from Dustvale breaks the silence. Saloon secrets and the sheriff's shame." Underneath were her words, edited raw, full of pain and truth. The bruises, the threats, the letters, the betrayal, and her name was signed at the bottom, Clara Mayfield, age 17, daughter, girl survivor. For the first time in her life, the world was listening, but Dustvale was not pleased. Backlash. The sheriff's rage thundered through the town, like an earthquake. Sheriff Briggs stormed into the Wild Rose Saloon, slapped the paper on the table, and shouted, "She made fools of us." "Good," Mama June muttered under her breath as she folded napkins. Briggs grabbed her by the collar. You think this is over? She faced the law now, publicly. Mama June didn't flinch. Then make it public, Sheriff. Let everyone see what you've protected. He shoved her away. But deep down, even Briggs felt something unfamiliar crawling into his throat. Shame. Arrest warrant within hours. Dustvale wired a notice to Silver Point. Wanted Clara Mayfield. Charge: defamation, fraud, and colluding with a known fugitive. When Thomas Weller, the journalist, read it, he was stunned. She's the victim, he said to the town marshal, not the criminal. The marshal gave him a sad look. Doesn't matter. The law's been bent in Dustvale for years, and now they're trying to break her with it. Thomas looked at Clara standing quiet in the corner with dirt on her boots and fire in her eyes. Won't let them, he whispered. The court summons 2 days later. Clara received a letter, not a threat. A summons. You are ordered to appear before the public court of Silver Point to respond to the charges made by Dustvale and Sheriff Briggs. Clara stared at the paper. Her hands trembled. Elijah, still healing, stepped beside her. We can run. But, Clara shook her head. No, if I run, they'll call me a liar forever. She looked out the window. They've stolen our bodies, but they won't take our truth. The courtroom, the old courthouse in Silver Point, was packed. Every bench was filled with townspeople, reporters, workers, mothers with babies, even a few former soldiers. The air buzzed with whispers. People had come not just to see courage. Clara walked in with her hair braided back, wearing a clean dress Thomas had bought her. She held her head high. Sheriff Briggs sat across the aisle, arms folded. Smugged out the judge, a grizzled old man named Judge Harrington, read the charges. Then he said something no one expected. We will hear from the accused. In her own words, Clara's voice. She stood. The room went silent. Clara's voice shook at first, then grew stronger. I'm not a liar, she began. I was taken from my home at 15 and sold to a saloon. My name is Clara Mayfield. I wasn't born to be a prostitute. I was made into one by fear, silence, and greed. She told them about Mama June, about the bruises the girls hid, about the letters she wrote, and the night Elijah saved her life. She looked right at Sheriff Briggs. You said I had no right to speak, but I said your time for silence is over. Some people clapped. The judge banged his gavel. Order. But something had shifted. The truth was heavier than the badge. The witness. Then came the surprise. Mama June appeared at the door, escorted in by 2 saloon girls and a preacher. She walked with a cane, face bruised but proud. I have something to say, she called out. She told the court everything about the years of hush money, about girls gone missing, about how the sheriff came through the back door more often than the front. She said, if this girl is guilty, then I'm guilty too. But I say let her walk free, and let the ones who used us wear the chains. The courtroom stood silent. The verdict judge stared at Clara, then at Briggs, then back at Clara. This court finds no evidence of fraud or defamation, he said finally, but plenty of evidence of corruption. He turned to the bailiff. Sheriff Briggs is to be removed from his post, effective immediately, pending full investigation. Gasps. Clara blinked, tears forming in her eyes. She wasn't going to prison. She had just pulled Dustvale's mask off in front of the world. The ending scene, YouTube video transcript format. Opening scene. Clara walking slowly into the courthouse, eyes scanning the crowded benches. Narrator calm and steady. They charged her with lies, but she carried the truth in her bones. Quick cuts. Clara standing before the judge. Elijah sitting quietly behind her. Mama June stepping into the courtroom. Narrator. Some battles aren't fought with guns. They're fought with words, with memory, with courage. Clara's hands shake as she reads her letter aloud. Her voice grows firm. Narrator. And sometimes, the smallest voice in the room becomes the loudest echo in history. Cut to Briggs being escorted out, his badge removed. Narrator. The price of a voice is high, but freedom is worth every scar. Final shot. Clara walking out of the courthouse into the sun. She closes her eyes, breathes in. Narrator. Her story wasn't just heard, it was believed. Screen fades to black. To be continued in Part 6, The Ride Through Fire. The morning after the verdict, Clara Mayfield stood at the edge of Silver Point, her boots sinking slightly into soft earth where the desert met the hills. The courthouse behind her had gone quiet. The paperboys had already printed the headline, Sheriff, removed after teen girl's testimony exposes Dustvale corruption. She had won. But victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because when you break a silence as loud as Dustvale's, the echo doesn't fade, it grows louder in places you've never imagined. And some men, especially those who thrived in darkness, don't forgive light. Final fury. Back in Dustvale, Mayor Collins, Briggs's brother-in-law, was livid. She humiliated us, he snarled. Our town is being mocked across counties. They think we're weak. His advisors nodded. He paced the mayor's office, tossing a silver coin in the air and catching it sharply. He slammed it down on his desk. Bring her back. I don't care how. No courts, no press. Make it look like an accident. And so he sent them 5 bounty riders in black dusters, no names, no badges, and no interest in truth, only coin. Mama June's warning. Clara had started packing a bag to leave Silver Point. She wanted to visit the Capitol, meet real lawmakers, maybe even speak at schools. But before she could go, Mama June knocked on her door. "They're coming, baby," she said, eyes filled with fear. "I heard them in the stables, black horses, no mercy in their eyes." Clara felt her throat tighten. "How long tonight? Maybe sooner." Elijah stood up behind Clara. "Then we leave now." Clara hesitated. "What about you, Mama June?" June smiled. "I'm old, baby. I'll slow him down if I have to. But you still got a fire this world needs." She hugged Clara tight. "Ride like the wind's chasing you, because it is." The escape begins. Clara and Elijah rode out of Silver. Just before sundown, they didn't take the main road. They followed the old miner's path through the ironwood ridge, where the trees were sharp and narrow, and the air smelled of ashdot. Clara gripped the reins of Mama June's mule, named Daisy, while Elijah rode behind her on a borrowed horse. The plan was simple: reach Whistler's Pass by dawn, cross the river, and disappear. But nothing was ever simple in the desert. The chase, they heard the riders before they saw them, hoofbeats pounding like war drums. Clara urged Daisy faster. Elijah turned in his saddle, cocking the revolver he'd kept hidden since the courthouse. "They're gaining," he shouted. "We'll have to split." "No," Clara yelled. "We don't have a choice." At the fork in the trail, they parted. Waist Clara veering left toward a rocky canyon, Elijah turning right toward the open flats. The bounty riders followed Clara. Fire in the canyon. As Clara raced through the narrow canyon, the walls echoed the thundering of hooves. The riders were closing in fast, shouting, firing warning shots into the air. One bullet clipped her saddle. Another grazed her shoulder. She bit her lip to keep from screaming. Then she remembered something. Elijah had told her once, if you're cornered in a canyon, don't run, climb. So Clara veered Daisy toward a steep rise of jagged rock and leaped. Off mid-gallop she scrambled upward, cuts slicing her palms, dust choking her throat. From the top she saw everything. The canyon, the riders, the sunset, and the dynamite crate left over from an old mining camp half buried in the rocks. She smiled. The explosion. She grabbed a rusted lantern from the crate, prayed it had oil. She lit a match with shaking hands and tossed it down into the canyon just as the lead rider passed beneath her. Boom! The explosion ripped through the canyon, throwing smoke and fire in all directions. Daisy fled into the distance. The riders screamed. One horse reared and threw its man. Clara crouched, low, heart pounding, watching chaos below. She didn't cheer. She didn't gloat. She just whispered, "That's for Sadie, for Millie, for every girl they forgot." The reunion. An hour later she found Elijah waiting near a dry creek bed. He was bleeding again but alive, smiling through cracked lips. "You blew them sky high, didn't you?" he asked. Clara shrugged. "I just lit the match." They rode together in silence until the hills gave way to flat land. Ahead lay Whistler's River, cold, deep, and wide. Beyond it was new land, a new life. But before they could cross, a final figure stepped from the trees. Mayor Collins. Gun drawn, hat low, eyes dead. "You think you've won," he hissed. "You embarrassed my town, my family. You cost me everything." He cocked the gun. "I'm going to make sure no one ever remembers your name." Clara stepped forward. "No," she said. "You're wrong." She reached into her coat and pulled out the last copy of her letter, the one she had tucked away the night before. She held it high. "You can shoot me, but this will outlive you. You can burn my name, but it's already written in ink." Collins laughed bitterly. "You really think people care?" She nodded. "Not people," she said, "but the girls do." And behind her, from the trees, came the sound of dozens of footsteps. Saloon girls, miners, preachers, mothers. They'd followed her. They stood with her, and Collins, for the first time, looked afraid. He lowered the gun and walked away. The river behind them glittered in the sunlight as Clara Mayfield and Elijah Granger crossed into new land. The air smelled different, fresher, freer, like it had never tasted the lies of Dustvale. She didn't cry as they passed through the last shallow bend of Whistler's River, not because she wasn't overwhelmed, but because her tears had already carved rivers of their own. Now she was ready to build bridges. A place called Haven's Rest. They reached a quiet little valley tucked between the hills of Northwood Ridge, a village called Haven's Rest, where the people grew corn, read books by candlelight, and taught their children to speak the truth without fear. Here, Clara and Elijah settled. He worked as a carpenter again, building benches for the church and shelves for the small schoolhouse. Clara, she became something even more powerful than a girl with a voice. She became a woman with a purpose. The letters keep coming every few days. A new letter arrived in town, not from Dustvale but from other places. Girls, women, mothers, some old, some young. "I read your story. I was one of them. Because of you, I spoke up." Clara didn't know how the letters found her, but they did. Some came folded in newspaper clippings. Others were written in pencil, dirt still smudged in the margins. One came wrapped in a piece of torn curtain with a note: "I escaped. I'm safe. Your fire lit my way." Clara kept them all. The schoolhouse beneath the willow, with the help of the townsfolk and Elijah. Clara opened a one-room schoolhouse beneath an old weeping willow tree. It wasn't much, just benches, chalk, and a borrowed Bible, but it was hers. She called it the Wild Rose School, in honor of where her fight began. She taught reading, writing, but most of all, she taught courage. One day a little girl asked, "Miss Clara, Is it true you were in a saloon? Clara smiled gently. Yes, sweetheart, and that's why I'm here now. So you'll never have to be. The end of Dustvale. Back in the desert, Dustvale began to rot. With Briggs gone and Mayor Collings disgraced, the town's secrets stopped making money. The Wild Rose Saloon closed its doors. The train stopped coming. The church emptied, and eventually the town was swallowed by sand and silence. No one visits Dustvale now, but sometimes the wind whistles through its broken windows and carries the memory of a girl who once whispered the truth, and that whisper still echoes. Mama June's arrival a year after the river crossing. Mama June arrived in Haven's Rest in a covered wagon. Clara ran to her with tears in her eyes. June hugged her, so tight she couldn't breathe. Baby, you did it. You made something good grow from everything they tried to destroy. I didn't do it alone, Clara whispered. No, June said, her voice shaking, but you were the match. And the fire never dies if the right hands carry it. June took over the school's kitchen. She became the heart of the town, just as she'd once been the soul of a broken place. Elijah's quiet proposal one evening, while watching the children play beneath the willow. Elijah sat beside Clara on the old bench he'd built. Do you ever think of leaving again? He asked. Clara looked at the sunset. Sometimes, but only in stories. He smiled. Well, I've got one more chapter in mind. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver and carved with a rose on one side and a flame on the other. I know we're both scarred, he said, but I think scars make room for roots. Clara laughed through her tears. I don't. You need a big wedding, just a promise. You already have that, Elijah said. This is just the proof. Final scene. The wind never forgot me. Years passed. The girl with the trembling hands and dusty shoes grew into a woman with gray in her hair and wisdom in her eyes. Clara's story spread across the country, first through letters, then newspapers, then books. A statue of a young girl holding a letter now stood outside the courthouse in Silver Point. Her school became a sanctuary for lost children, and every spring, on the anniversary of her first letter, the people of Haven's Rest gathered beneath the willow tree. They read aloud one story from her old journal, one letter of truth, one memory of fire.